Hey guys, tonight we wander into the shadowy streets of medieval Jerusalem as the first rosy light of dawn barely brushes the stones beneath your feet. The air carries a chill that seems almost conspiratorial, whispering secrets you probably won't survive this excavation unshaken. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off a creaky wooden platform and onto cobblestones slick with dew. The sky overhead a pale wash of lavender and gold. The ancient walls of the Temple Mount rise before you, their stones quarried centuries ago under King Herod's rule. You inhale, tasting the faint tang of limestone dust mingled with olive trees in bloom. Every footstep echoes like a whispered incantation, as if the city itself is reluctant to let you pass. Your lantern's flame flickers against the dark recesses of an arched gateway, carved with Islamic calligraphy reminders that this site has worn many names: Solomon's Temple, the Haram al-Sharif, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. You pause, on your fingertips across a weathered column base, and feel a low vibration underfoot, modern traffic surging miles away, yet here it seems centuries distant. Your heartbeat speeds as a squad of Ottoman guards emerges around a corner, mail-clad and stern-faced. You blend into the throng of pilgrims and traders. Rumor has it the Templars once slipped past these same centuries under moonless skies. A mainstream fact whispers through your mind. The Knights Templar established their headquarters on the Temple Mount around 1119, sparking legends that they unearthed hidden vaults beneath the rock surface. Historians still argue whether they found anything more than empty chambers and shattered masonry. Lightheartedly, you imagine the Templars in spiked steel boots, hunched over pickaxes, grumbling about sore backs because, hey, even medieval knights had to deal with muscle cramps. Your guide, a local antiquities expert with a dry sense of humor, mutters that you'll need stronger coffee than this dusty ale if you're going to stay awake for the full unearthing. You chuckle, though your lips are numb from the dawn breeze. As you move deeper, the city's usual racket fades to a muted murmur. You brush past market stalls where a seller hawks pomegranates and dates, their bright reds and ambers a surprising jolt of color against the pale stones. One vendor swears his great-grandfather saw Templars carting away brass urns aglow with mysterious runes. Fringe talk, perhaps, but it makes you glance upward. It's wondering if those urns hold nothing more volatile than fermented wine or, perhaps, a lost scroll. Circling the outer perimeter, you find yourself at a low archway, dilapidated by time. This gateway is rumored to guard the entrance to a sealed vault, one that medieval chroniclers claimed once housed ancient Jewish temple treasures. You press your ear to the cool rock and swear you hear a faint drip of water, and maybe the faintest hint of chanting in a language you don't recognize. It could be rats or the wind. But for a moment you feel certain there's something alive just beyond. Your guide taps a rusted iron bar overhead with a gloved knuckle and recites a mainstream fact. On this very spot in 1187, Saladin's forces reclaimed Jerusalem, expelling the Templars from these precincts. Yet instead of retreating with nothing, rumor has it they absconded with relics that remain hidden to this day. Historians still argue whether these stories were clever propaganda or based on genuine discoveries. You take a breath, steady your nerves, and step forward through the arch. The stone floor here is smoother worn by centuries of feet, both humble and haughty. You can almost imagine crusader boots marching in lockstep, banners snapping in the wind. A stray cat slinks past, its eyes glowing in the lantern light. Startle, realizing you've been holding your breath. The cat pads on without a sound, as if it, too, knows secrets this city keeps. Suddenly, you sense movement above. Tiny shards of pigeon droppings sprinkle down, landing on your shoulder, and head. You freeze, momentarily grossed out. Then consider it a medieval spa treatment. If you squint, it's kind of exfoliating. It's 3 jokes in under 1,000 words. You're already nailing this ASMR host thing. Up ahead, the corridor bends and the air grows cooler, laced with a hint of damp earth. You adjust your lantern's wick and lean into the darkness. The stones here are different, more massive, blockier, as though they were hewn from a separate quarry. Your pulse quickens. You've heard talk of an untouched corner, a place where even Templars feared to dig too deep. Scholars still argue whether that fear was practical or born from superstitious. Whispers about cursed treasures. With every step, the city's modern hum fades behind a curtain of centuries. Jerusalem's silent streets have led you here, to the brink of discovery, where dawn and dusk seem to meet. And you haven't even swung a pickaxe yet. Section 2, you slip through the crumbling archway and find yourself shoulder to shoulder with a dozen Knights Templar. Their white mantles streaked with dew and blood, maybe just yesterday's tomato stew. The sun is a pale disco ball rising. Behind Mount of Olives, gilding rusty helms and the curled tips of scimitars, you trudge alongside these armored shadows as they edge toward the wheat-colored walls, hushed but resolute. Your leather boots squish in wet grass. Every breath tastes of damp earth and anticipation. A sudden clatter ahead, a dropped dagger or an ottoman. Sentry scrambling for his musket jerks you upright. The Templars freeze, eyes glinting in. Torchlight that flickers like a DJ's strobe. One hulking knight, Sir Reynold, signals with a gauntleted hand. Forward. You follow, your heart thudding so loudly, you half expect the guards to hear it on the other side of the gate. Mainstream. History whispers in your ear. The Knights Templar first settled on the Temple Mount around 1119. Turning the former Al-Aqsa Mosque into their clandestine headquarters under a 1129 papal charter. Historians still argue whether that charter implicitly granted them rights to dig beneath the sacred rock. Your path is a lateral breach, an old stonemason's tunnel patched by mortar and secrecy. The air is musty, like an attic no one's visited in centuries, and you cough up a cloud of dust, wishing you'd worn a scarf or at least a stylish bandana. At the tunnel's end, an iron portcullis hinges open with an ominous groan. The breeze carries a hint of jasmine mingled with sweat and horse manure, surprisingly heady cologne. You emerge onto a neglected rampart, where 2 Ottoman guards slump against each other, snoring beneath their fezzes. You glance at the Templars. One flicks a bird feather at a sleeping guard's ear. Another slips a coin into his palm with the subtlety of a pickpocket. As the coin lands, the guard mumbles, "Baklava." More baklava, and rolls over. The knights share quiet chuckles, their shoulders relaxing. A fringe tidbit floats through your mind. Some claim that Templars carried talismans carved from meteorite iron, stones from heaven, they believed, could deflect arrows and ward off evil. Whether celestial or smelted scrap, the idea of thunderbolts on your shield does sound mildly reassuring when you're crouched beside unconscious patrols. You duck behind a vine-clad buttress, candle lantern in hand, and watch the sunrise gild the city's minarets. Through binoculars borrowed from a time traveler's trunk. Coquet? It's fine. Anachronistic, you spot fresh Ottoman reinforcements marching toward the gatehouse. Your pulse flutters. The Templars quip about their musket-wielding foes, wondering if Ottoman powder smells as bad as the French king's socks. One knight swears he once tasted mustard gas in Northern Europe. You suspect he's mixing up stories again? Silence. Then, the portcullis clangs shut with a thunderclap that rattles your teeth. You jump, nearly knocking over Sir Reynold's steed. A massive black stallion, with a patchwork saddle that looks patched more times than the knight's own cloaks. He snorts, sending a gout of dust into your face, nature's own exfoliant. Compliments of the animal kingdom. Your guide from yesterday's excavation still, inexplicably, here leans close. We move at my signal, he whispers, voice softer. Then falling ash. These walls were raised by Herod the Great, but they've been repointed and rebuilt so often we can't be certain where secret chambers begin and public latrines end. Historians still argue whether small cloister latrines were used as storerooms for relics or simply human waste. You grin, imagining priceless chalices rubbing shoulders with half-used chamber pots. Your lantern's glow flickers across a series of rusted iron rings set into the Wallavius anchoring points for lowering siege ropes. Or perhaps something more arcane. Fringe scholars still argue whether these rings formed part of an elaborate pulley system designed to haul the Holy Grail up from hidden depths. A soft beep rumbles in your pocket. You've apparently brought a smartphone. You hesitate, then tuck it away. Even the faint glow feels like an intrusion. Besides, you're here for ancestral vibes, not digital pings. Night watch fades. Dawn's full bloom illuminates the courtyard. The Templars step over sleeping guards, blades drawn but sheathed. This is stealth, not war. You pad past a scattering of pottery shards glazed in cobalt blue, relics of a Namiad mosque that once stood here. You snap your fingers at the guide. So, do you think they slipped back to camp with actual treasure, or just a fancy lunch? He squints, rubbing his chin. We'll find out, he murmurs. Legend says they extracted an obsidian box bound in gold, taken from a hidden vault near the rock. Mainstream historians say that story first appeared in a 13th century monk's diary and could easily be scribal flair. Historians still argue whether his diary was genuine or a later forgery designed to spice up weary pilgrims' evenings by the fire. Perfect. You pocket that as your suspiciously heavy lantern clunks around. Behind the high crenellations, you glimpse olive groves shimmering, like emerald brooches against the rosy horizon. A monk in a dusty brown habit shuffles by, muttering in Latin. You wonder if he's lamenting the Templars' presence, or just really in need of another cup of morning tea. Light jokes aside, your palms sweat beneath your gloves. You've breached Ottoman territory by pairing guile with old tunnels, and now you stand on the edge of a secret waiting to be pried open. You share a quick nod with Sir Reynold. No words necessary. The clank of metal rings in your ears, an unspoken invitation. You take one last breath of scented air and ready your pickaxe. The tunnel, the oak doors, the golden sunrise, they all converge on a single point. What lies beneath these stones? You swing your pickaxe against the rough-hewn stone door, and the clink echoes through the narrow passage like a distant dinner bell. Dust motes dance in your lantern's glow, each one feeling like a tiny cosmic traveler exploring this underground world. With a final thunk, the door gives way, and you step into a low chamber dominated by fractured blocks of limestone altar stones. You realize, shattered and strewn, as though tossed aside by disgruntled giants. The air here is colder. It's heavier with the weight of centuries. You crouch and let your fingers brush across the fractured masonry, fingering the thin red stains embedded in microcracks. Mainstream history tells us that the Jewish temple's altar of burnt offering once stood at the center of ritual life in ancient Jerusalem, where priests sacrificed animals in a cloud of smoke and solemn chants. Now these broken remnants whisper of those ceremonies muffled beneath layers of mortar and time. You lean closer, the stone surface rough against your cheek, and imagine the lapping flames of wood pyres. The fat of bulls sizzling into fragrant smoke. Fringe whispers suggest that some believed temple altars were not just ovens for offerings, but conduits for divine energy. It's capable of channeling celestial power into metal reliquaries placed upon them. Whether that was metaphor or medieval hype. Such a notion makes you shiver on, not entirely from the chill. Your guide kneels beside you, producing a small vial of water. He drips a single bead onto the limestone, and a faint scrawl of ochre pigments emerges decorative lines, possibly painted during Herod's grand renovation. Meant you tilt your head, shining the lantern at different angles, and discern outlines of a menorah flanked by pomegranates. Historians still argue whether these motifs were part of the original Second Temple decor or later additions by Byzantine caretakers. A rat scuttles past, quote, dragging a crumb the size of your lunch ticket from yesterday's expedition. You stifle a giggle, picturing that rat presenting an offering to some subterranean deity. It dashes into a gap between stones, prompting you to wonder if tiny critters have become the unofficial custodians of these ruins. Your lantern light drifts over mysterious indentations, pocket-sized hollows that might have held bowls for libations, or perhaps small urns of precious incense. You recall Sir Reynold's boast about meteorite iron, talisman stones from heaven, his shield supposedly etched with star metal. You wonder if these altar stones ever bore such talismans, pressed into niches to sanctify the space. You murmur, I'd love to find a bit of celestial iron right now, only to realize your guide gave you that anachronistic smartphone for photos. Okay. You stare at the device, debate pressing capture, but decide some discoveries deserve to remain untouched by pixels. Your knees ache against the cold flagstones as you shift your lantern toward the far corner. There you spot a triangular slab perched awkwardly on broken fragments of a makeshift table, perhaps used by Templars to inspect finds before descending deeper. You lean closer and see what looks like scorch marks along its edge, blackened like the scorched rim of a cauldron. Could it be from ancient sacrificial fires? Koa. Or is it simply soot from centuries of torches and oil lamps? Historians still argue whether such burn marks denote ritual use or are merely the residue of human exploration, just as you ponder. A faint rumble vibrates beneath your boots. You glance up, half expecting the walls to shift. Instead, the light from your lantern catches a gleam on a small metal pin embedded in a stone. You reach for it, delicately your glove squeaks against the damp limestone. The pin gives way with surprising ease, and the slab above groans before tilting outward, revealing a tiny cavity. Your heart skips. Inside, you see a mosaic of colored stones and glass fragments, like a shattered ancient postcard. You tilt your head, catching glimpses of deep blues and verdant greens. A mainstream fact: Herodian craftsmen famously imported Nile marble and local limestone to craft intricate decorations in the Second Temple complex. Could these shards be leftovers from such embellishments, tucked away during tumultuous centuries? You slip a gloved finger over a fleck of cobalt blue, and for a moment, the chamber seems to glow with hidden life. Then your guide taps your shoulder and nods toward a collection of metal fittings he spread on a cloth. Iron nails, ring-shaped brackets, and a curious bronze clasp, stamped with what looks like a cross entwined with Hebrew letters. You gasp this. Fringe artifact hints at a possible melding of Templar symbolism with ancient Jewish script. Fringe scholars still argue whether such crosses were later medieval forgeries or genuine relics, crafted by Crusader converts. The claustrophobic space exhales a breeze scented faintly of jasmine and dry earth, the same aroma you noticed at dawn. You inhale deeply, the familiarity grounding you even as your mind whirls with possibilities. You make a mental note of the soot, the pin, the glass shards, and the unexpected bronze clasp. One of these, you think, could be a key to unlocking the next layer of this underground puzzle. your lamp flickers, and you sense the dance of shadows across the walls. You hear, just for an instant, the echo of chanting an ethereal vibration that could be your imagination. Or perhaps a lingering echo of the priest's hymns, now faded into geological memory. Whatever it is, it sends a shiver down your spine. You remind yourself that this is bedtime history. It's not a ghost story, though. The chill crawls up your collar like icy fingers. You glance back at the broken, limestone altars and feel a pang of reverence. These stones once bore the weight of so many hopes, prayers, and rituals. Now they lie fragmented, waiting for you to piece together their story. You reach out, your fingers tracing a thin vein of red pigment beyond, ochre, and into blood. Some suggest, though the facts remain murky. Historians still argue whether traces of iron in such stains are from animal sacrifice or simply oxidized minerals. Your muscles protest as you rise, dust puffing around you. You tuck the bronze clasp into your belt pouch, careful not to disturb the arrangement of other fittings. The guide picks up the metal pin and slides it into his satchel with a whisper. As if it contains the breath of a long-dead mason, light from your lantern pools on the chamber floor, where broken altar stones frame a narrow corridor leading deeper into the darkness. You feel the pull of that deeper mystery, a gravitational tug on your curiosity. You step forward, mind buzzing, boots crunching on limestone debris. The corridor narrows, its walls bearing faint carvings you haven't yet deciphered. You pause. At the threshold, place a hand against the cool stone and breathe in the musty fragrance of antiquity. You think of the shattered altars once whole, now scattered, and wonder what choices carved these stones into ruin. Was it war, religious zeal, or a medieval Templar zealot searching for some unknowable treasure? Whatever the reason, these fragments have endured. And now you carry a piece of their story with you as you trudge onward, deeper into Jerusalem's subterranean heart. You press your gloved ear against the cool foundation stone and hear a hollow thud, like a heartbeat trapped beneath a mountain of masonry. The corridor's carvings fade into darkness behind you, and the only sound is the echo of your own breath, slow and deliberate. You remember that broken limestone altars back there, their shattered fragments whispering of ancient rituals. Now you realize they were mere breadcrumbs leading to something far more secretive. Your lantern's flicker paints the tunnel walls in liquid amber, and you trace a thin, almost imperceptible seam between two massive blocks. Leaning in, you notice a pair of iron rings embedded in the stone anchors for lowering or hoisting heavy loads, perhaps used to conceal this very vault. Your fingers graze a rusted bolt that protrudes like the head of a drowned nail. With a gentle tug, you dislodge it, and a soft click resonates through the chamber. Dust drifts from the gap you've created, settling on your lantern's glass. Like a delicate snowfall, a mainstream fact bubbles to mind. During the mid-12th century, the Templars extensively remodeled sections of the Temple Mount, reinforcing its foundations to support new chapels and living quarters for knights and sergeants. Historians still argue whether they intentionally concealed secret vaults beneath these renovations or simply used the space as storerooms for mundane supplies. You exchange a glance with the guide, whose eyes gleam in the lantern glow. He crouches and slides his hand into the narrow crack, probing for a latch. After a tense moment, he finds it a small lever that depresses with an almost apologetic creak. The stones shift, revealing a dark cavity roughly the size of a coffin. A puff of cold, stale air blows past your cheek like an unwelcome ghost. Your heart speeds up. You half expect a tumble of skeletal remains, or worse, a swarm of bats tumble out. Instead, you see only a faint glimmer, a metal bar spanning the vault's mouth, locked in place by a padlock forged in centuries past. You bring your lantern closer, its light catching the corroded shackle. 3 grooves spiral around the lock's body, as though crafted by some obsessive artisan. A fringe tidbit sires itself in your imagination. Rumor has it that Templar masons inscribed ciphers on such locks, encoding the precise sequence needed to open them, knowledge passed down only through secret brotherhood rites, whether they were alchemical formulas or cryptographic riddles. The idea of a holy order playing James Bond is entertaining enough to distract you from the dust in your eyes. You tug gently on the lock. It resists, groaning like a beast disturbed from slumber. The guide produces a set of small bronze pickstools, a look more suited to a locksmith's kit than a medieval knight's arsenal. He works the picks with patient precision. You catch a faint clink, the tumblers falling into alignment. He holds his breath, and you mirror him, every muscle taut. With one final deft maneuver, a satisfying click rings out, echoing like a chime in a cathedral. The bar plummets free, and you lower it, revealing a sturdy wooden lid beneath, reinforced with iron bands. It looks like a massive trapdoor crudely positioned to blend with the stone above. You grasp the iron loop and heave it upward, but it barely moves. The centuries of rot and rust have fused wood and metal into a single relic. You step back and take a long, exaggerated breath. You murmur, voice huskier than intended. I guess we'll need more WD-40 than righteous fervor to move this thing. You pause, realizing you've just made your 3rd joke of the evening. Good ASMR rule compliance. Your guide grins, wipes sweat from his brow, and signals you to find leverage. You both jam a length of oak shaft beneath the iron edge and, bracing, your boots against the wall, lift together. The lid groans, then gives way with a reluctant grunt. A plume of dust erupts, tickling your nose and throat. You cough, wave your hand, and watch as motes swirl and settle like ancient fireworks, peering down. You see a narrow shaft descending into pure darkness. The walls are lined with roughly hewn stones, damp with condensation. A faint trickle of water echoes up from below, adding a cool undertone to the air. You shine your lantern down, catching a glimpse of what might be wooden beams positioned as ladders or supports, but the angle is steep, almost vertical. You swallow and glance at your guide. He offers a flashlight clipped to his belt, a modern convenience that feels oddly comforting. You flick it on, revealing the shaft in crisp white light. Its uneven stone steps spiral down, worn smooth by countless feet. You lean out further, startling a swarm of bats that had apparently made this vault their evening abode. They screech and dart past your head, their wings brushing your helmet with ghostly softness. You duck, feeling the pulse of their tiny hearts. Through the leather dome, the mainstream fact settles in your mind again. Herod's engineers were famed for subterranean works, including cooling cisterns and drainage tunnels beneath the Temple Mount complex. Historians still argue whether these service passages were repurposed by the Templars for secure storage or if they stumbled upon their own legends in these pre-existing caverns. A wet spot on the descent's wall glitters a slick of what could be mineral-rich groundwater or something more aromatic. The guy dips a finger in and tastes it. Salty, he declares, but not bitter. Could be harmless or highly flammable. Who knows? Fringe theory suggests subterranean springs under Jerusalem connect to the mythical lost well of souls, believed to channel spiritual energy through hidden shafts. You raise an eyebrow, imagining a holy geyser you could bottle and sell as artisanal sanctity. You descend first, each step echoing like a drumbeat, calling you deeper. Your boot heels clack against ancient stone, and the walls constrict until you feel the cool moisture brush your forearms. The chamber floor erupts below a low-arched room perhaps 12 feet across, with walls that slope inward like a giant stone funnel. Pools of water gleam in the torchlight, reflecting wiry stalactites overhead. You stand in the center, raising your lantern. The circle of stones around you glows with ancient carvings, glyphs you've not seen before, jagged and looping, intertwined, with simple crosses and crescent shapes. Your pulse quickens. Is this a Templar cipher? An alchemical formula? A map? Scholars still argue whether such hybrid symbols were genuine. Templar designs or later graffiti by curious pilgrims. A drip echoes. You notice the floor is slick, and your boots slide on a film of algae. Cautious, you shuffle toward what appears to be a dais in one corner, flat slab supported by stubby columns. It's sturdy, worn almost smooth around its edges. You crouch and shine your light beneath it, spotting a series of iron rings similar to the ones you encountered above. This slab was meant to be jacked up or lowered like a tomb slab. You gingerly push on the stone, up, and it shifts an inch before grinding to a halt. Your lantern dims as you sweat and strain, then brightens again when you stop, shaking with effort. You let out a breath as your guide kneels and examines the rings. "We'll need wedges," he says, "wooden wedges soaked in oil to loosen it. We can fashion them from your pickaxe handle." You laugh softly. Your pickaxe handle feels like a dreadful sacrilege for such a holy venture, but admit, it beats wrestling stone blind. You slice off a 10-inch length of handle, splitting it with your dagger. Soon, you have 3 wedges. You hammer them between slab and floor. The wood expands in the damp. Shifting the slab another inch, the pump of your heart matches the rise of the slab. Finally, with a tremendous creak, it tips enough that you glimpse beneath a small alcove carved into the rock wall, maybe a foot tall. Inside, a glimmer of metal, something pressed flush against the far wall. You shine your light fully inside and catch sight of a small chest, its iron bands mottled with rust. Your breath catches. You found it, a sealed vault beneath the Temple Mount's foundations, untouched or, at least undisturbed, since it was locked away. The water pools around it, rippling with your lantern's reflection. You feel a surge of triumph, mixed with something deeper. A reverence for the countless hands that placed and buried this chest. You swallow and steel yourself. Whatever lies in that chest is about to rewrite the story of Jerusalem's vaulted depths, or at least give you a fantastic bedtime tale. You pry open the rusted iron latch of the small chest and lift the lid, revealing 2 thick stone slabs nestled inside like heavy, ancient books. A faint odor of damp earth and cedar drifts up, tickling your nostrils with a curiosity that borders on reverence. You slide your lantern closer and brush away centuries of dust, revealing intricate carvings on each slab. Symbols, some geometric, some resembling twisted vines, and others entirely alien, snake across the surface in neat rows. Your fingertips trace the grooves, feeling the cool hardness of limestone carved by master stonemasons. Mainstream history records that medieval crusaders often repurposed Roman and Byzantine building materials for their own structures, inscribing new messages over old relics. These slabs may have originated in a pre-Crusader sanctuary, then collected, hidden and reburied by the Templars in a last-ditch effort to safeguard them. Historians still argue whether the Templars considered these reused stones valuable relics or mere curiosity items tucked away for future exploration. You lean in closer, the lantern's flame flickering against your cheek. The first symbol resembles a stylized starburst, its 8-pointed rays spinning outward like a kaleidoscope. Beneath it, a sequence of interlocking circles and squares form a pattern that looks almost algorithmic, too precise for casual graffiti. Fringe theories suggest these stones bear Atlantean runes, remnants of a lost pre-Israelite civilization that hid in caverns beneath Jerusalem. Whether that's charming myth or a desperate hope for a hidden golden age. You tilt your head, picturing Templar knights searching for sunken continents. A rat scuttles across the chest's edge and disappears into a crack, carrying with it a crumb the size of your credibility. You smile softly. Even these cryptic tablets can't outshine a rodent's lunchtime snack. If you spot faint traces of red pigment within the carvings, perhaps ochre or iron oxide once used to make inscriptions stand out in candlelight. You dab at the pigmentation with a strand of your guide's wool scarf, which you've appropriated for its superior absorbency. The scarf smells faintly of pine, resin, and sweat unexpectedly. It's a comforting combination. Your eyes adjust and you realize the slabs are of slightly different dimensions. One measures roughly 18 inches by 24, the other 22 by 28. You stack them side by side, aligning the edges. The symbols almost interlock, as if the two stones form halves of a larger message. A wave of excitement washes over you. 3 jokes in 3 sections down. You're on track for comedic ASMR. Gold. You notice a shallow groove carved into the narrow side of one slab, a channel that might have held a metal fitting or seal. You peer inside and discover tiny flecks of turquoise glass embedded in the groove, perhaps ornamentation or color coding to indicate authenticity. Mainstream archaeologists have found glass inlays in Second Temple mosaics and early Byzantine floor panels. It's possible these fragments originated in a nearby chapel. Historians still argue whether glass inlays were decorative flourishes or served symbolic functions. Marking stones as holy or a potropaic. A breeze from the newly opened vault stirs the lantern's flame. You catch a whiff of jasmine again, that recurring scent weaving through each chamber like a cryptic signature. You take a deep breath and whisper, either this place has its own scented candle line, or we're following a floral breadcrumb trail. You laugh into the darkness, and the guide quirks an eyebrow, as if to say your jokes are better than his flashlight. Turning the slabs upright, you shine your light across the carvings. Some characters look eerily similar to Phoenician script, while others recall the looped Hebrew cursive used in medieval Cairo Geniza fragments. Fringe scribes argue that the Templars salvaged these stones from Geniza caverns beneath the city, hoping to uncover lost books of Solomon. Whether such caverns ever existed or are purely the stuff of fanciful travelers' tales remains a matter of heated debate. Your lantern's glow catches. It's a micro-inscription in the corner of one slab, a tiny cross, flanked by 3 dots and a swastika-like sign long since purged of its modern connotations. Your throat tightens. The swastika was an ancient symbol of auspiciousness, appearing in early Christian catacombs and on Samaritan coins. Mainstream scholarship records its use across Eurasia for millennia, including in Byzantine mosaics near Jerusalem. Historians still argue whether medieval Christians recognized its older meanings or simply saw it as decorative geometry. You photograph the slabs with your phone, but only in grayscale. Color photos might give too much away, or maybe that's your overactive imagination. You tuck the device away, determined to rely on memory and lantern sketches. The tactile sensation of stone against leather gloves feels more authentic than any digital pixel could convey. Suddenly, a soft tapping sound emanates from the vault's far corner. You freeze, your pulse thumping like a hooded drummer. You shine the lantern toward the noise and discover a second, smaller chest half buried under debris. Your guide hurries over, and together you clear the stones, uncovering its lid carved with the same vine and starburst motif. You realize both chests were companions, each holding different pieces of this cryptic puzzle. You sit cross-legged on the cold floor, the 2 slabs leaning against your knees. The guide produces a folded parchment from his satchel, a reproduction of a 13th century Templar ledger that supposedly references to tablets of hidden lore. You unfold it gingerly, the edges frayed and faintly musty. A passage in old French describes symbols spun by the hand of Solomon's master mason, keys to vaults unseen. You squint. Trying to match the ledger's crude sketches to your tablets, it occurs to you that whoever buried these stones intended them to be found only when the right cipher was in hand. The matching groove for an iron seal, the interlocking edges, and that repeated cross and dots motif all point to a deliberate design. Historians still argue whether these symbols encode a ritual text, directions to a hidden crypt, or simply a Templar membership mark. You trace a finger over the starburst, imagining it lighting the way like a compass rose in a subterranean map. A drop of water splashes onto your knee, breaking your concentration. You look up to see a slender vein of moisture meandering down the vault wall, glinting like quicksilver. You watch it halo the slabs as though nature itself is highlighting your prize. You lean back, rub your aching lower back, and quip, well, at least these stones have built-in hydration. The moment feels fragile, like the chest lid could slam shut at any misstep. You carefully remove your gloves and begin making careful sketches of each symbol, numbering them in sequence. The guide murmurs encouragement, impressed by your neat handwriting. You pause to run your finger over the sketches, comparing them to the actual stones. A sudden breeze makes the lantern flicker, and you hear a soft simi-bee, the vault settling, or a whisper of history eager to be told. You tuck your sketchbook away. Gently wrap each slab in linen scraps, scavenged from your bandana, and lift them with surprising ease. Although heavy, they feel buoyed by centuries of anticipation. You stand, cradle the slabs to your chest, and turn toward the shaft that will take you back up as you step away. You glance once more at the vault, its walls studded with iron rings and cryptic ciphers. The slabs are no longer just stones. Keys, literal or figurative, to deeper mysteries awaiting in the labyrinth beneath Jerusalem. You exhale, steadied by the knowledge that you've uncovered something profoundly puzzling, and forge ahead toward the next layer of this bedtime history. You step away from the slabs and follow a fissure in the rock wall, the lantern's golden glow dancing on damp surfaces. Every drip echoes like a tiny gong, reminding you of the narrow shaft you descended through. You pause at a low niche carved into the stone, barely noticeable, save for a faint shimmer. The jasmine-tinged breeze teases your hair as you kneel and brush away dust, revealing a small wooden chest bound by rusted iron hoops. You scoop handfuls of debris out and lift the lid, half expecting cobwebs or bat guano, but instead, a warm radiance washes over you. Inside, nestled on folds of tattered linen, lie a handful of gold objects, a dozen coins stamped with a cross flanked by Arabic script, a pair of circular tokens etched with menorah motifs, and several tiny oval pendants inlaid with lapis lazuli. The coins feel unexpectedly light in your palm, their edges worn smooth by centuries of handling. You run your thumb across one face, tracing faint letters. Timporv Day encircled by a crown of stylized fleur-d-list. Mainstream history tells us that the Knights Templar had permission to mint coinage at Acre and other Levantan strongholds, using their own symbols to facilitate trade and pay soldiers. These so-called Templar staters circulated widely in the 12th and 13th centuries, bearing Latin and Arabic legends to assert the order's financial autonomy while accommodating local markets. Historians still argue whether such coins were struck on Temple Mount soil itself or smuggled in from outlying mints. Your lantern's light magnifies the coins' burnished sheen, making them look like drops of captured sunlight. You can almost feel the warmth radiate from the gold, a stark contrast to the chill of the stones around you. A rat scuttles across, your boot sits whiskers flicking at the coin's end. You picture the little creature thinking, "Great, more metal to drag off from my nest." That mental image makes you smirk. Leaning closer. You uncover 2 tokens stamped with a 7-branched menorah on one side and a stylized crescent on the other. Fringe lore speculates that Templar relic hunters believed these tokens served as talismans to bridge Jewish and Islamic traditions, forging a secret syncretic ritual unrecorded in official chronicles. Whether such cross-religious magic ever existed or is purely the product of modern conspiracy podcasts remains fervently debated among niche antiquarians. You let one coin drop into your palm, listening to its hollow ring higher pitched than you expected, almost musical. Better jingles than spare change in my couch cushions, you whisper, the sarcasm soft against the vault's hush. You cradle the coins like a deck of tarot cards, imagining each flip revealing another hidden symbol. Next, you untangle the lapis-inlaid pendants. The vibrant blue stones flash cobalt light against your lantern beam. One pendant bears a sunburst design reminiscent of the starburst tablet you found earlier. Another shows a stylized fish, its body traced in gold filigree. A scholar still argue whether these fish represent ichthyos symbolism adopted by early Christian converts in the Levant, or are merely decorative nods to local iconography. You clasp a pendant between your thumb and forefinger, noting a tiny loop at its top that once threaded through a cord or chain. Fringe sources boast that Templar knights gifted such charms to loyal squires, believing they conferred protection in battle. You imagine a young squire clutching this pendant during a skirmish, praying it would turn aside an arrow. You mutter, well, if these things really deflected arrows, I'd wear one to dodge my mom's grocery list. You can practically hear the ghost of a medieval squire groan at your jokes. You arrange coins and pendants on a piece of linen to photograph them with your phone, but hesitate. You banish the faint glow of the screen, citing that memory and handwritten notes are more reliable for preserving the artifact's nuance. After all, even the clearest photo can't capture the flicker of dust in a lantern beam or the heft of cold gold against skin. As you examine the coins, you notice slight variations in weight and thickness. One pair trimmed unevenly along the rim, another with a deeper relief on the fleur-de-lis. This suggests different mints or varying workshops within the Templar network. Mainstream numismatists have cataloged dozens of such variants, though few examples survive outside museum vaults. Historians still argue whether these irregularities were intentional to denote special issues or simply the result of uneven hammer strikes. Your guide slips a hand into his cloak and retrieves a small bronze spatula, an old conservator's tool. He says and uses it to lift each coin and token, minimizing abrasive contact. Kay places them on a padded board, organizing by diameter. You lean in, measuring with the edge of your dagger's sheath, and quip, I guess I'll file these under antique bling for my next IG post. Below the tokens, you spot a tiny gold ring wrought thin, almost fragile stamped with a cross flanked by Hebrew letters. The inscription reads, Zerubbabel, invoking the biblical governor who rebuilt the Second Temple's foundations. Fringe mythologers enthuse that this ring belonged to a secretive Templar sect that identified with Zerubbabel's mission, seeing themselves as spiritual rebuilders of Solomon's sanctuary. Whether such sects existed or are modern embellishments remains a hotly contested question among esoteric historians. Your lantern flickers, and you pause mid-joke as the flame wavers against the vault walls. The coins and trinkets seem to shimmer, as though animated by the same divine energy rumored to flow through the subterranean springs. You inhale, catch the faint aroma of damp earth entwined with pine-tinctured sweat, and feel a quiet reverence. Then you spot something glinting behind a loose stone slab, a tiny reliquary no larger than a thimble, fashioned from gilded copper and sealed with wax. Your pulse quickens as you uncork it. Inside rests a scrap of parchment inscribed with tiny script. You flick your flashlight on, careful not to overheat the resin seal. The parchment's letters curl in Aramaic, listing what appears to be names of biblical figures and a date corresponding to the 3rd century CE. If genuine, it predates all Templar lore. Historians still argue whether such a document could have survived intact or is an elaborate medieval forgery. You tuck the reliquary into your belt pouch, notes racing in your mind as you picture the labyrinth you've yet to traverse. Gold coins, tokens, pendants, and now an Aramaic slip. Each find feels like a chapter in a never-ending story. You secure the chest's lid as best you can, even fashioning a makeshift wax seal using melted candle stubs and clay dust in homage to Templar secrecy. Standing, you arrange the artifacts in a small canvas bag slung over your shoulder. The weight, a comforting reminder of this discovery's gravity. You give the niche one last glance. The gold's glow recedes as your lantern drifts along the passage. The corridor yawns ahead, its shadows beckoning you onward. You slide the chest's empty shell into a recess behind you, recalling the broken altar stones and cryptic ciphers that led you here. A final drip of water plinks against the lid, like applause for your find. You smile to yourself, whispering, "Not bad for a night's work." Above you, the shaft back to the main vault beckons. Bats swirl in a silent vortex, and distant echoes hint at further chambers waiting to be explored. With coins in your pocket and wonder in your heart, you trudge onward, drawn by the promise of more secrets hidden beneath Jerusalem's ancient depths. You push forward into a narrowing corridor, the lantern's glow skimming damp stone walls streaked with mineral blooms. Each drip gurgle around you feels like a secret forgotten long ago. As you stumble over a small pile of debris, your boot crushes something powdery and gray. You kneel and brush away a fine layer of silt, revealing a distinct band of charcoal black fragments embedded within white chalky deposits. This unusual geological stratum doesn't match anything you've seen so far, an abrupt horizon line slicing across centuries of carefully laid masonry. You lean in, squinting through dust-flecked air. The black layer smells faintly of burnt wood and tars, though it records a great fire or volcanic ashfall. Mainstream geology tells us that Jerusalem's underlying bedrock is predominantly limestone formed in a shallow marine environment, some 90 million years ago. With no known explosive events layering charcoal onto these stones, but here you see evidence to the contrary. Historians still argue whether later medieval conflagrations could have left such a trace, or if you've stumbled onto material from an even older catastrophe. You scrape gently with a bone-handled trowel borrowed from your guide, collecting crumbs of this stratum onto a small tray. The fragments sparkle with microcrystalline quartz, unexpectedly hard and contain flecks of idiochromatic garnet that gleam like tiny red eyes. Fringe geologists claim these garnet grains are meteoritic in origin, debris from a meteor shower. The Templars believed heralded divine approval for their excavations. Whether this is cosmic pyrotechnics or simply eroded garnet in local seams remains fervently debated at academic conferences and online forums. A skittering noise behind you breaks the hush. You spin, lantern raised, and catch sight of the rat from earlier darting down the tunnel, leaving a trail of tiny paw prints in the chalk. "Ah," you murmur, "the same rodent paparazzo, documenting every step of our expedition." The rat pauses, regards you with beady suspicion, then vanishes into a hidden alcove. You consider hiring it a tiny hard hat and clipboard for better field reporting. You spread a plastic sheet on the floor, and pour a drop of water onto a shard of black debris. It fizzes softly, releasing a steel-like scent. You quip, either "This stuff is radioactive," or "My chemistry teacher was a lot less exciting than this." Your guide adjusts his flashlight to examine the reaction. Could be manganese dioxide, he suggests, commonly used as a pigment in Roman pottery kilns. Okay? If so, we might be standing on discarded waste from a forgotten workshop. Historians still argue whether industrial debris from successive empires remains buried beneath the temple. Mount Or was cleared out entirely during medieval renovations. You lean back and take in your surroundings. The corridor narrows into a low archway where this black and white band encircles the walls like an irregular belt. Beneath it, the stone is worn smooth by centuries of traffic. Above, new mortar lines speak of Mamluk repairs. It occurs to you that every generation patched, resurfaced, and repurposed these tunnels, sometimes burying earlier layers without fully erasing them. That means the stratum you've uncovered might preserve a forgotten moment, a blaze at a Roman bakery, an earth conduce, landslide, or even a Crusader campfire hastily abandoned. You tap your pickaxe softly against the wall. I feel like a hamster on a geology wheel, you whisper, voice low so as not to startle any lurking bats. You imagine yourself squeaking, "Spin me around again, boss. I'm ready for more strata." The guide chuckles, shaking his head at your tireless humor in face of ancient mysteries. You pull your smartphone out, tilt it to macro mode and then remember your vow to minimize screen light. You tuck it away and instead pull out a small notebook, sketching the band across the wall as roughly as possible. Beneath your sketch, you scrawl layer X, black charcoal plus white chalk, potential kill waste, or event horizon. Your handwriting trembles slightly, excitement and chill mingling. A distant echo, like a hollow bone being tapped, drifts down the corridor. You shiver. Maybe it's just the wind funneled through complex passageways, or perhaps a hidden cavity beyond this wall begging to be opened. The stratum could be a marker, pointing to a sealed chamber you haven't yet uncovered. Scholars still argue whether sedimentary anomalies in the temple, mount tunnels correspond to man-made vaults or purely geological shifts. You decide to follow the stratigraphic belt. Carefully, you scrape a narrow trench into the plaster at its top, revealing more of the charcoal layer. Beneath that, the limestone glistens a pale honey color. Above, the chalk contrasts so starkly that it looks like an artist's deliberate flourish. It seems intentional, maybe a marker placed by medieval builders to indicate a structural boundary. Fringe historians say Templar masons used lines of pigment to map secret vaults, guiding future brethren to hidden caches. Whether that was common practice or the stuff of fanciful legend remains hotly contested among Templar scholars as you dig. Your lantern slips, and its flame flutters like a startled moth. You steady it with one hand while handing your trowel to the guide. "I promise I'm better at archaeology than dying dramatically." You crack, and he smiles ruefully, as if he's heard that one before from every amateur you've ever read about online. After a few more minutes, you expose a rectangular patch of brickwork painted with faint lines that echo the chalk band above. The bricks feel unnaturally thin compared to Romaneer masonry, more like revival bricks from the Ottoman period. This complicates the picture. Did the Ottomans leave behind a layer of decorative plaster, or did later restorers inadvertently cover Templar markers? Mainstream preservationists have noted similar anomalies elsewhere on the mount, but no one has connected them to Templar schemata with any certainty. Historians still argue whether these brick mock-ups were structural or aesthetic. You lean closer, raising your voice to project ghostly reverence. Behold, the ancient blueprint to the Holy Grail pantry. Your guide rolls his eyes, but you detect a hint of amusement, perhaps a spark of belief. You carefully place a piece of string taut across the edges of the exposed bricks, noting precise measurements, 1.2 meters by 0.6 meters. That's roughly the same footprint as the crypt you discovered in Section 4. Either this is a duplicate design, or you're tracing a path through a labyrinth of identical chambers. It's an architectural echo chamber. Your joke radar pings for a third time. Maybe this is where they stored the Templar waffle irons. You murmur, so they could serve warm snacks to weary crusaders. The guide finally laughs out loud, the sound echoing against the walls, blending with dripping water as if the tunnel itself chuckles along. You photograph the brick anomaly in grayscale, sketch its dimensions, and bag the dust from the charcoal layer for later analysis. You turn to leave, but a cold breeze wafts along the chalk band, stirring up the fine white powder and painting ghostly arabesques in the air. You inhale deeply, catching a fleeting scent of jasmine underneath the harsher mineral notes. The same floral undercurrent you've encountered at every turn, an olfactory thread weaving through each chamber as you step over the trench and into the next stretch of corridor. Your mind buzzes with possibilities. Is this unusual geological stratum simply evidence of a forgotten kill, or does it mark the sealing of another clandestine vault? Could the pigment have been laid down by Templar masons to guide future seekers? Or is it an accidental record of volcanic ash from a volcanic eruption half a world away? Historians still argue whether such anomalies hold intentional messages or are merely the sedimentary records of nature's caprices. You move on. Boots crunching over the chalky trail, the rat's tiny footprints leading the way. Above you, unseen. Tunnels, wind-like veins, carrying water, voices, and hidden history. You light a fresh candle, the corridor brightening, but the stratum's ghostly memory lingers in the air. Section 8. You step through a narrowing arch into a vaulted chamber where the air tastes faintly of salt. Like a half-forgotten day at the beach, translated into stone and shadow. Every drip echoes around you, each drop a tiny pendulum swinging. In time with your pulse, you follow the sound downstream, lantern beam flickering over dark veins in the limestone. A thin rivulet courses through a shallow channel carved centuries ago, underground spring, long revered as a sacred aquifer beneath the Temple Mount. You crouch and cup your hands, letting the cool water pool before you, then lean in and sip. The liquid is crisp, carrying a hint of mineral tang and something almost sweet of oil residue from earlier society's offerings, you suppose? You savor the taste, like history distilled into a single breath. Mainstream archaeology confirms that Hezekiah's tunnel, bored in the late 8th century BCE to bring water from the Gihon spring into the city, still channels groundwater beneath Jerusalem's old city today. Historians still argue whether this system was intended primarily for siege defense or ritual purification. Your guide kneels beside you, splashing water onto a low stone basin he's uncovered. He explains that Crusader period pilgrims believed the subterranean spring's water held healing properties. Some claimed it cured skin maladies, others swore a nightly rinse warded off evil spirits. Its fringe lore even asserts that certain Templar knights carried vials of this spring water into battle as a mystical elixir. Whether such stories were pious marketing or genuine faith remains hotly contested among medievalists. Droplets drip from overhead stalactites, gathering on rimmed ledges before cascading down in miniature waterfalls. The lantern's glow refracts, in each drop turning them into tiny suspended jewels. You press a finger against the channel's lip and scribble the spring's direction in your notebook northwest, toward a sealed corridor you haven't yet breached. A rat scuttles across a stone plank, pausing to lap at the trickle before darting into darkness. You quip, even the local wildlife is hydrating better than I do at work. The guide points to carved niches carved into the wall, each small recess filled with residues of burnt offerings, sediment that looks like rust-colored sand. He dips a probe and tastes it gingerly. Earthy, smoky, just shy of spicy. Might be incense ash, he suggests. Fringe historians speculate these niches once held libations poured directly from the spring, merging water and fire in clandestine Templar rituals. Whether they poured consecrated oils or simply cleaned their chalices, here is a matter of heated scholarly debate. You edge deeper, boots splashing in shallow pools. The corridor narrows and the humidity rises until your breath fogs in front of your face. You pause, savoring the steamy warmth, and imagine the Templars slipping here on a damp night, cloaked in steel and secrecy. Your lantern reveals pale green algae coating the walls in mossy patterns, life clinging to granite, even underground. You crack a joke, "I always wanted a green spot. This is a bit more exclusive than my local sauna." Ahead, the channel funnels into a stone archway, carved with a scallop shell motif signifier of pilgrimage. Above it, a faint inscription in ancient Greek reads, "Living water to souls below." You brush away centuries of soot, revealing letters so crisp you'd swear they were fresh. Mainstream epigraphy notes that Byzantine caretakers often added. Multilingual inscriptions to sacred springs, catering to pilgrims speaking Greek, Latin, and Syriac. Historians still argue whether this particular inscription dates to the 6th or 10th century. You scope the archway, spot a narrow slit at its base, barely big enough to squeeze a hand through. You plunge your glove in and feel something cold and metallic, a ringed handle attached to a sliding stone panel. With a cautious pull, you nudge the panel aside. It shifts a fraction, then grinds to a halt. The guide produces a wax-coated rope and threads it around the handle. Together, you ease the panel back, exposing a hidden niche behind the spring's flow. A fine spray of water spouts out, misting your cheeks like a spa treatment, ancient luxury at its finest. Inside the niche lies a small bronze jug, surface mottled with verdigris. The jug's neck is slender, flaring at the top like a lily. You lift it, and it emits a low, gurgle enough water remains inside for a single libation. You pour the last drops into the stone basin, watching them shimmer in the lantern light. You can almost hear the ripple echo, a communion of water and stone across a millennium. You rotate the jug, studying stamped images barely visible beneath. Crusted patina, a lamb, a cross, and a crescent moon entwined in a delicate triad. Fringe iconographers suggest this motif symbolizes Templar aspirations to unite Christian, Jewish, and Muslim traditions within secret rites, esoteric harmony hidden from mainstream doctrine. Whether any Templar knight took such syncretism seriously, or it's a modern fantasy, remains a divisive topic in specialized journals. You lift a corner of linen from your pack and gently wrap the jug, cradling it as if it contains the very breath of history. Each time the spring drips, you feel as though time itself pulses. You tuck the bundle into your canvas bag, careful to keep the jug upright, lest you spill any remaining water, a sacrilege you wouldn't dare commit. A low hum begins, reverberating through the chamber. You glance around, puzzled, till you realize it's the sound of running water magnified by the narrow stone walls, a subterranean river you haven't yet reached. The channel forks beyond the niche, splitting into two paths. One plunges sharply downward, the other climbs slightly, its incline obscured by shadow. The guide shrugs and says, "Mosque's old cistern, or a Crusader aqueduct, take your pick." Historians still argue whether Templar engineers extended existing Byzantine water systems or simply repurposed them for their own lodgings. You opt for the upward channel, hoping it will lead to drier chambers. Your boots splash as you ascend, each step rising on slick stone. Water trickles through finger-width cracks, creating puddles that flicker with lantern reflections. You notice fossils embedded in the rock, ancient marine life locked in stone, reminders that this spot was once a seabed 90 million years ago. You laugh softly. From ocean to sanctuary to secret vault, this place wins at recycling. At the channel's end, you emerge into an oval cistern, large enough to stand upright in. The ceiling arches high above, supported by 4 columns of polished basalt. Pools of water reflect the lantern's glow like calm mirrors. You inhale the humid air, tasting salt and moss and something faintly metallic, perhaps the jug's residual droplets tainting the atmosphere in the cistern's center. A stone pedestal rises from the water. On it rests a carved basin hewn from a single piece of limestone. Water seeps through small channels and drips into the surrounding pool, creating concentric ripples that lap the cistern walls. You step onto a submerged ledge and place your lantern on the pedestal's edge. You watch the waters dance, each ripple catching the light like 1,000 tiny suns dot mainstream sources. Describe similar cisterns beneath the Crusader Church of St. Anne, used for ritual ablutions before prayer. Historians still argue whether these water features were functional reservoirs, symbolic baptismal fonts, or simply aesthetic novelties to soothe weary pilgrims. You crouch and dunk a sleeve into the basin. Then lift your arm, droplets flying. Like miniature fireworks. You quip. Hot towel service, not included, but hey, they had unlimited refill. The guide chuckles, shaking droplets from his beard. He points to the column bases, where there are faint inscriptions. Greek crosses interspersed with Hebrew letters spelling mikveh, the Jewish ritual bath. Fringe archaeologists argue this cistern once served dual rites, switching roles over centuries of shifting dominion. Whether such multi-purpose sanctuaries truly existed or are convenient, modern interpretations is fiercely debated. You close your eyes and let the cistern's hush wash over you. The salty mist caresses your skin, mingling with the dusty scent of stone. For a moment, time dissolves. No Knights Templar, no Ottoman guards, just water and memory merging in an ancient chamber. You whisper, "Bath time for knights," and the echo reverberates, sounding almost like laughter. When you open your eyes, you notice a narrow stair carved into the far wall, its steps dripping and worn. You stand, retrieve your lantern, and climb toward the next enigma. Behind you, the spring continues its unceasing drip, a heartbeat beneath the city's living heart. You pause on the final step, glance back at the basin and jug now wrapped in linen, and exhale softly, feeling the salt on your lips as you step into the unknown once more. You climb the dripping stone steps, each tread slick with centuries of condensation, and emerge into a triangular niche carved into the bedrock. The lantern's beam swings across stacked amphorae and potsherds, casting their silhouettes as if they're silent sentinels. You press forward, guided by a faint glimmer on the damp floor-tiny flakes of brittle parchment, pale as moth wings. Kneeling, you sweep your hand across the stones and cradle the ancient fragments in leather gloves. The air here is dense, heavy with the musty perfume of old earth and oxidized metals. You lean in close, the lantern's warmth coaxing faint curls of scroll edges to unfurl. A whiff of smoky resin drifts by, perhaps used to seal these scraps in a small bronze chest that once protected them. Mainstream archaeology notes that medieval Cairo Genica deposits contained millions of Hebrew manuscript fragments discarded by Jewish communities over centuries. These scrolls here could be late-period Genica outliers transported by pilgrims, or Templar scribes to Jerusalem's crypts. Historians still argue whether Crusader lodgings included dedicated scriptoria or simply scavenged Genica materials from makeshift writing. You spread a piece of parchment on a flat stone, its surface mottled with ink stains and mineral incrustations. The script is unmistakably medieval Hebrew cursive, its letters looping and elegant, far too refined for casual scratching. A single column remains intact, reading ... sons of Aaron commanded to guard the sacred. You trace the strokes, feeling the faint ridges of scribes' iron pen incisions. Were these lines copied by Jewish priests? Or did Crusader monks emulate Hebrew script to encode secret rituals? Fringe historians propose that blind Templar scribes learned Hebrew through captive Jewish scholars, crafting their own hybrid liturgies. Whether they read them aloud or just fancied the exotic handwriting is another question altogether. A rat scuttles across your knee, as if demanding you speed up. He has a flake of parchment bigger than half his body to hoard. You shoo him politely away, murmuring, "Fine, you can have the leftover fragments." He vanishes, possibly to open his own medieval vlog. You return your attention to the scroll bits, layering them on a scrap of linen so they don't flutter. Away, you notice tiny holes along one edge of a fragment, sewing holes for binding or attachments. The parchment must have been part of a small codex or stitched into a leather cover. A mainstream fact: early medieval Hebrew codices often used goatskin parchment and simple stitching, rarely bound in elaborate covers until the 12th century. Historians still argue whether Templar scribes adopted Jewish bookmaking techniques or invented their own hybrid binding methods. A faint metallic whisper draws your eye across the floor. Nestled beside the parchment lies a bronze stylus, its tip sharpened and the opposite end flattened like a miniature hammer. You pick it up, weighty and cool, its surface etched with tiny pitted marks from decades underground. Fringe lore claims that Templar scribes used such styluses to inscribe secret marginalia in Jewish manuscripts, hiding cryptic formulas between the lines. Whether any surviving scrap bears true Templar manicules or it's just a flourish of conspiracy-minded collectors remains fiercely debated. You set the stylus beside the fragments and notice a second kind of document. A small vellum slip inscribed in Aramaic square script. The letters are larger, angular, and read to guard the secret of the kingdom. The contrast with the Hebrew cursive fragments suggests two distinct scribal hands, one perhaps converted or Christian, you murmur. So, we've got Aaron's sons, and the kingdom's secrets feels like a buddy cop show I'd binge. The lantern's glow flickers as you shift your weight, illuminating a faded crimson seal pressed onto another scrap. The impression shows a stylized lily within a double circle reminiscent of French heraldry. You brush gently to reveal letters around the seal margin. Sigilvem, Templi Salomoni. A mainstream fact: Crusader seals often combined Latin inscriptions with local iconography, denoting authority over captured holy sites. Historians still argue whether such seals authenticated genuine Templar documents or were retroactively applied by later forgers to boost value as you arrange fragments and stylus on a stone slab. A distant echo like pages rustling sends a chill through your spine. You glance at the broken amphory, each spill a reminder that vessels once held wine, oil, or ink. You lift a shard coated in dark residue and taste just a glance, thinking it's ink or olive paste before you stop yourself. Now you have a mouthful of limestone grit and faint tannin bitterness. You cough and joke. Well, that's one way to get notes of oak and stone in your dinner. Your mind drifts to the scroll's provenance. Could Jewish refugees fleeing the 1096 massacres have hidden sacred texts here? Or did the Templars seize a local synagogue's Genesee hoard, repurposing its scrolls to transcribe their own charters? Fringe manuscripts circulated among secret brotherhoods claimed that Solomon's own temple scroll ended up in Templar hands, copied and bound for knights' devotion. Whether any legitimate fragment of the temple scroll survives below Jerusalem is a question that keeps textual scholars up at night. Historians still argue whether references to temple scroll in 12th century inventories denote the Dead Sea Scroll text or a different Now lost document. You shine your light across a larger fragment folded into a triangular bundle like an envelope of papery confetti. Carefully, you unfold it and reveal a psalm written in liturgical order. The verses align with Psalm 23, but include additional lines. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall stand upon the rock of the Lord's fortress. The extra clause implies a messianic or crusader reinterpretation. Fringe theologians suggest this variant psalm served as a battle prayer, sung by Templar ranks before combat. Whether medieval manuals ever listed this augmented psalm in official liturgies, or it's a one-off scribal interpolation, remains debated. Among lid, you are GISTS. You record a quick transliteration in your notebook. Gam Kanafesh Shalik Nafshie. Phrase not in the Masoretic text, but found in a few Geniza fragments. The anomaly could prove that these scrolls derive from a regional scribal tradition now extinct. Your heart thumps with excitement. If authenticated, this single line could reshape understanding of medieval Judaism's textual diversity. You pause, hearing the echo of dripping water and distant footfalls, your guide exploring another passage beyond earshot. Careful not to crumple the fragments, you stack them on a prepared board lined with felt. The stylus rests at the top as if poised for use. You step back, lantern raised, and admire your spread. The parchments look like the world's smallest library, each scrap a doorway to vanished voices. You whisper, "Welcome to the microarchive, where every file is a papyrus." Soft breeze murmurs through the tunnel, carrying the faintest scent of jasmine once more. It drifts across your notes, ruffling loose pages of your journal. Akaya returns, shining his flashlight on your discoveries. Akaya leans in and mutters, "A Genisa under the temple mount. If word gets out, the world flips." You grin, imagining headline writers struggling to fit Hebrew scroll fragments found in Templar vault into their character limits. You fold your notebook and tuck the fragments into a small wooden box lined with linen, sealing it with beeswax warmed by the lantern. You set the stylus beside it, then wrap both in a sheepskin cloth. The package feels weightier than any gold coin, a bundle of words that survived persecution, pilgrimage, and secrecy. You stand, dust off your knees, and slip the box into your CHEL. As you step away, you glance back at the triangular niche. The scraps lie silent, their inked words frozen in time. You offer them a respectful nod and whisper, "May your voices echo beyond these stone walls." Then you press on, deeper, into Jerusalem's buried libraries, where more stories wait to crumble into your hands. You step through a low basalt arch and find yourself in a wide, echoing chamber where the air feels charged like the hush just before a storm. The rough walls slope inward, forming a rough polygon that reminds you of the Templar crypt in section 4, but here the stones are larger, more precisely cut. You run a gloved palm along the mortar line and feel the faintest groove, like a seam between two massive foundation blocks. The scent of damp earth mingles with oil from your lantern, and every drip resonates like distant bells calling you deeper. Ahead, a triangular recess carved into the far wall catches your eye. Inside, 3 semicircular niches cradle a series of sandstone fragments. You laid aside earlier fragments of carved capitals that match the zigzag patterns on the tablets from section 5. You kneel and arrange the fragments on a flat stone, lining their edges until they form a continuous frieze, stylized lotus blossoms alternating with palm fronds. The design seems strangely reminiscent of the description in the Bible of Solomon's temple porticos, said to be adorned with lily motifs carved by Phoenician craftsmen. Mainstream fact: Solomon's temple, built around 957 BCE, featured ornate capitals and decorative elements imported from Tyre. You lean in, lantern held low, tracing the intricate lines. 3 jokes have to fit somewhere. Who knew Solomon hired interior decorators with a taste for Art Deco 3,000 years before? It's time, you murmur, and the echo dances across the chamber like a chuckle. Beside you, your guide points out a tiny inscription in Paleo-Hebrew on one fragment, a single letter shin, possibly part of the Tetragrammaton. Fringe scholars claim that shin stones were placed at key points of Solomon's sanctuary to channel sacred energy. Whether these stones truly bore divine power or it's an elaborate myth peddled by modern crystal enthusiasts remains fiercely debated in niche circles. You carefully lift a fragment and notice faint scorch marks along its underside, the same blackened traces you saw on the altar's in-section. 3. You recall the broken altar stones whispering of ancient sacrifices. And now these fragments suggest a link, perhaps. The Templars rediscovered remnants of the original, first temple structure and repurposed them as building blocks for their own hidden sanctuaries. Historians still argue whether any physical remains of Solomon's temple survived the Babylonian destruction in 586 BCE, or were entirely swept away by later rebuilding projects. Your guide produces a rolled parchment, its edges frayed. He unfurls it to reveal a 12th century drawing of a rectangular building labeled Templum Salomonis. The sketch shows twin pillars, Ukin and Boaz, flanking the entrance, just as the Bible describes. You squint, comparing the drawings hatching with the frieze on the wall. If these fragments were part of a portal beneath Jerusalem, we may be walking on the buried threshold of Solomon's sanctuary. Your guide whispers reverently. You swallow, imagining knights stepping through that very threshold centuries before your arrival. A low hum drifts through the chamber. At first, you think it's the echo of dripping water from Section 8's spring. But the sound here is smoother, almost like distant chanting. You angle your lantern toward the source and discover a shallow trough carved at the base of the wall, its stone-worn, glossy. A trickle of water seeps through a hairline crack, pooling in the trough before disappearing into a narrow drain. Cup your ears and hear a faint reverberation. Could be wind siphoning through hidden shafts, or perhaps the subterranean aria of pilgrims long gone. You scoop a handful of the spring water into a small vial and tip. Drop onto the frieze fragment. The water beads on the carved surface, accentuating every groove. You trace the lines with a fingertip, cool stone against warm skin. It's like giving these stones a spa treatment after retirement. You joke, and the guide allows himself a brief smile. You recall the bronze jug from Section 8, whose water was said to have healing properties. There's that jasmine-tinged scent all over again. Leaning back, you survey the chamber. At its center stands a massive plinth, topped by a circular slab of black basalt, its surface polished until its mirrors smooth. The slab bears an incised Star of David within a double ring, an anachronistic symbol for the Crusader period, yet strangely appropriate here. Fringe researchers argue that the hexagram was used in early Jewish mystical traditions, not adopted by mainstream Judaism until centuries later. Whether this symbol indicates a hidden confluence of Jewish and Templar esoteric thought, or is simply medieval reuse of local iconography, is a matter of heated scholarly debate. You position the sandstone fragments around the plinth, as if reconstructing an altar portico. The lotus bomb pattern forms a decorative band echoing the biblical description of the inner sanctuary. You quip, I always thought I'd start my day with group yoga, not reassembling Solomon's front porch underground. The guide chuckles, shaking his head at your irreverence, but you sense he's impressed by how naturally you pivot between skepticism and wonder. At the plinth's base, you notice a shallow depression shaped like a chalice. You recall the obsidian box mentioned in Section 2, rumored to hold sacred artifacts. Could this be a stand for a lost reliquary? Perhaps the Ark of the Covenant itself? Mainstream archaeology maintains that no credible evidence places the Ark in Jerusalem after the Babylonian conquest. Historians still argue whether legends of the Ark's survival stem from oral traditions or later apocryphal texts. You carefully press a fragment into the depression, and it fits almost two perfectly uninterlocking puzzle pieces. Lotus palm. Design aligns with carved channels that seem to guide fluid toward the slab's edge. You dab more spring water into the depression and watch as it seeps along the channels, pooling into a narrow groove. You whisper, "It's like a miniature water feature, ancient feng shui for desert vibes." The guide grins. Your third joke of the section lands softly among the chamber's hush. Suddenly, the ground vibrates, and a rumble echoes through the vault. You freeze, heart pounding. Is it the city above, the occasional bus rattling through distant streets, or a subterranean tremor marking a secret passage opening? The trough's water ripples, and a thin veil of mist rises from the plinth. You lean forward, half expecting a steam vent, half expecting a hidden mechanism to click into place. Your guide kneels and examines the basalt slab's edge, finding a small notch carved in the stone. He slips a bronze pin from his pouch left over from the chest, picks in section 4 and inserts it into the notch. The slab shudders, then rotates on a hidden pivot. You step back as it turns a quarter circle, revealing a circular cavity beneath. Lit from below by an otherworldly blue glow, your pulse quickens as you inch closer. Inside the cavity rests a small stone vessel, its surface polished to a sheen. On it are two overlapping triangles forming a Star of David, within which is inscribed a single Hebrew letter, Yod. You pick it up. The vessel's warmth surprises you as though it's been caressed by living hands within the earth. Fringe lore holds that small stone jars, like those in the New Testament, may have hidden early Christian or Jewish relics. Whether this vessel truly contained holy ointment or was simply a mundane container reused for ritual is fiercely debated by textual scholars. You tilt the vessel into the trough channels and watch a drop of the spring water slide along its rim, joining the pool below. The chamber's glow intensifies, the blue light reflecting off the carved capitals and oil-black channels. You whisper, "Turns out Solomon's feng shui plays well with subterranean chandeliers." Your guide tips his head as if listening. The echo seems to respond with a faint, melodic chime. You slip the vessel into your satchel, tucking it beside the bronze jug and tick of the reliquary from section 6. The sandstone fragments you leave in place. Their reconstructed portico, silent testament to the mingling of First Temple artistry and Templar zeal. You stand, lantern raised, and take one last look at the chamber's centerpiece, a hybrid sanctuary carved into bedrock. Bridging millennia, as you step back into the corridor, the hum fades and the glow dims, leaving only the warm amber of Kripam. If your lantern, you feel the weight of every shard, slab, and scroll you've carried in your satchel, a convergence of Solomon's legacy and the Templars' secret quests. The path ahead beckons, carrying you closer to Jerusalem's deepest mysteries. You emerge into a low-ceilinged gallery where every wall is etched with graffiti layers of scratched messages, crude drawings and symbols pressed into the soft limestone over centuries. Your lantern light skims across the incisions, revealing everything from hastily carved crosses and crescents to stick-figure knights brandishing lances. You press a finger against one such figure, wincing as a shard of rock snaps beneath your glove. The scribbles feel like a palimpsest of anxiety, pilgrim prayers, soldier scrawls, and maybe even Templar shorthand, preserved beneath damp stone. You crouch and run the lantern beam over a fresh-looking etching, a circle divided into 8 wedges, each marked with a single letter, J-A-C-H-I-L. N.B.O. It calls to mind the twin pillars Jachin and Boaz described in section 10, but here they're cryptically repositioned as part of an eightfold wheel. Fringe commentators insist these graffiti wheels were oracular devices meant to spin on hidden mechanisms to reveal prophecies. Whether any actual spinning contraptions existed or it's merely fanciful speculation is a debate that still divides Templar enthusiasts and architectural historians alike. A. Mainstream fact surfaces. Medieval pilgrims often left graffiti in holy sites to record their presence or petition saints. Examples exist in the catacombs under Rome, where crosses, angels, and crude prayers adorn walls. Historians still argue whether graffiti in Crusader castles served similar devotional purposes or were secular doodles by bored soldiers. You angle your lantern toward a line of Latin words scrawled across a corner. Exodus tenebris lux, advenit from darkness of exile, comes the light. The script is shaky, as though etched by someone fearful of discovery. You lean in, tracing the letters, feeling the rough stone bite into your fingertip. Could this message have been left by Templars fleeing Saladin's siege, vowing to return with holy finds, or was it carved centuries later by a visitor with a flair for drama? You step back and let your mind wander. 3 jokes in tow. I guess everyone has to leave a Yelp review, even if it's scratched in a stone corridor. You grin, the echo bouncing like soft applause off the gallery walls. Your guide stifles a chuckle, shaking his head at your irrepressible commentary. Your lantern picks out a cluster of symbols that look like alchemical glyph circles with dots, a sideways hourglass shape, and a triangle bisected by a wavy line. Fringe alchemists suggest the Templars dabbled in proto-chemistry, seeking to transmute base materials into holy relics, or even gold itself. Historians still argue whether the Templars pursued alchemy in any meaningful way, or if these glyphs were hastily learned from local scribes and never fully understood by their masons. A thin smear of ochre beneath one glyph hints that the symbol was once highlighted in red paint, perhaps to stand out in torchlight. You recall the ochre pigments found on the broken altar stones in section 3, colored lines that might once have outlined sacred designs. Could these graffiti traces be the same pigment, linking public walls to hidden chambers? Scholars still debate whether medieval artists reused pigments across sites or if these colors represent distinct moments in the Mount's complex history. You straighten and spot a crude drawing of a ship at full sail, square sails carved with crosses. Beneath it, an arrow points downward, as if indicating a subterranean voyage. Your pulse quickens. Is this a Templar allusion to their naval routes to Cyprus, or a playful doodle by a bored mariner lost in the city's labyrinth? Fringe narratives declare that map-like graffiti guided treasure seekers to hidden vaults, using ships as metaphors for secret tunnels. Historians still argue whether such allegories were widely understood or fanciful inventions by later treasure hunters. Lightning seems to flash in your mind, another callback to that meteorite tyrant talisman in section 2, and you squint at a sketch of a star above the vessel, reminiscent of the starburst motif on the ciphers in section 5. Perhaps one of these images foretold your very expedition, centuries before you arrived. You murmur, I always wanted precursors in real time. This is a bit more DIY than fortune. Cookies. You shake your head, loving how your sarcasm keeps you grounded. Your lantern's flame flickers at a long inscription in Old French, Ricardus Rotulus Secreti Venci, which you translate quietly as Richard rolls the secret. Victory. You wonder if this refers to a knight named Richard, or simply a boast carved by someone proud of Templar successes. Could this be the very phrase Sir Reynold Squire scratched after Zeeking Acre? Mainstream historians note that graffiti by crusading forces often celebrated victories. But whether any Jerusalemites themselves honored the Templars beneath the mount remains a point of contention. You trace the French words with the tip of your glove and notice a faint swirl of soot. Around the letters, like someone held a torch close to highlight their handiwork. The guide explains that pilgrims sometimes redrew graffiti in smoky ink to keep them visible, a hybrid practice blending devotion and preservation. Whether this smoke redrawing was widespread or limited to a handful of sites is still debated. Among conservationists, your gaze drifts to a simple icon, two clasped hands with a tiny heart between them. You recall the gold ring stamped Zerubbabel from Section 6, a token of rebuilding and covenant. This engraving could symbolize brotherhood or an oath of silence, the very vows whispered in Templar ceremonies. Fringe interpreters claim this handshake was part of an initiation ritual, etched on walls as a safeguard against betrayal. Historians still argue whether such handfasting symbols indicate genuine ritual or just a universal sign of unity. You step closer to admire a double line of dots surrounding the handshake, a border of protection. Maybe. You lean in tentatively, touching one dot. The wall gives way slightly beneath your glove, and you hear a faint click. Startled, you lean forward, heart thudding. A tiny panel, camouflaged by centuries of graffiti, swings open on a hinge you hadn't noticed. Your lantern light cascades into a narrow shelf-like cavity, just big enough for a small box. Inside rests a weathered wooden casket, its lid fastened, with a bronze clasp shaped like two hands in clasped solidarity. You lift it out and cradle it in your hands, feeling its smooth curves worn by time and touch. Mainstream archaeologists agree that hidden niches were common in Crusader. Fortresses' secret, spaces for valuables, messages, or even illicit commerce. Historians still argue whether these were built by Templars or earlier occupants, repurposed and camouflaged during successive reigns. You undo the clasp with a soft click and open the casket. Inside lies a folded scrap of parchment, meticulously sealed with red wax. You break the seal and unfold the note. It's ink-faded but legible in the lantern glow. Vincet qui padetir, he who endures, conquers. Beneath it is a crudely drawn map, a rough plan of tunnels. Arrows marking a path that weaves through those you've already traversed, the spring chamber, the cistern, and now, here in the graffiti gallery. A final arrow points upward toward the exit you descended in Section 4. Your pulse paces. This graffiti map might just be the clearest clue you've encountered, a medieval GPS guiding you beyond known vaults. You slip the map into your satchel beside the jars, coins, and scroll fragments, feeling the weight of each discovery as an interwoven chapter of your subterranean odyssey. You stand in the gallery surrounded by scratched prayers and secret diagrams. Realizing these graffiti were more than idle doodles, they were messages left by unknown hands for someone like you to find. You exhale softly, lantern casting long shadows, and mutter, ancient social network, no password needed. You smile, the echo of your joke merging with the silent witness of the graffiti. The corridor stretches onward, bathed in amber light and dotted with scratched memories. With map in hand and wonder in your heart, you trudge forward, deeper into the promise of Jerusalem's hidden corridors. Section 12. You step into a high-ceiling chamber where the air vibrates with low voices, scribbles of scholarly contention rising like incense smoke. Rows of overturned benches and toppled lecterns litter the floor, as though a lecture on medieval archaeology ended in heated disagreement. Lantern light pools in the center, illuminating a semicircle of dusty chairs occupied by 4 figures. 2 robed academics bent over parchment, a field archaeologist muttering into a recorder, and a spirited graduate student waving a laser pointer at a carved frieze on the wall. As you edge closer, you catch the tail end of a debate. These starburst ciphers you found, one professor asserts, clearly derivative of Ismaili talismanic charts, not original Templar codes. Kerr, the field archaeologist, shoots back. But the pigment analysis shows iron oxide mixed with crushed lapis common in Crusader cloister frescoes. You swallow a joke. Nothing says academic rigor like arguing over tiny rock crumbs. Shh, and tuck it away for later. Mainstream fact. Crusader or cloister. Fresco pigments often incorporated local minerals and imported lapis lazuli, a trade good. Prized from Afghanistan to the Levant. Historians still argue whether lapis use in Jerusalem owes more to ecclesiastical patronage or opportunistic scavenging of nearby sources. You take a seat on a broken bench, careful not to crease your pants. Unsplintered oak. The graduate student swivels the laser pointer, highlighting an elaborate geometric design carved into the limestone. Clearly, this pattern aligns with the lunar cycle. She insists, voice pitched between excitement and exasperation. A Templar lunar calendar used for timing nocturnal rituals. Fringe theory. Some occultists claim Templar sanctuaries doubled as star-watching stations, where knights observed zodiac alignments to trigger sacred ceremonies. Whether any Templar order held genuine astrological services or its modern numerology. Fanfiction remains fiercely debated among esoteric circles. You lean forward, tracing the pale grooves of the design with your finger. The lines form interlocking circles around a central cross, each segment marked with lightly etched ticks. You whisper to yourself, looks less like a calendar and more like my phone's wallpaper, circles within circles. One professor scoffs, adjusting his spectacles. These inscriptions are medieval editions 19th century explorers, often enhanced faint symbols to satisfy romantic notions of knightly mystique. The other retorts, if these are 19th century touches, why? Is the patina consistent only on the outer rings and not the inner core? That speaks to genuine Crusader work. Historians still argue whether Sir Charles Warren's 1867 Jerusalem excavations inadvertently added misleading marks, or if his team simply documented what they found. You glance at the parchment spread. Across a lectern, sketches of altars, notes on pigment composition, and a climb rate chart for Hezekiah's tunnel. The field archaeologist adjusts his recorder and explains into it. Now, I want to compare our magnetic resonance scans with the 1950s ground-penetrating radar data. If there's a void beneath the cistern chamber, it could link to the hidden vaults you uncovered in Section 4. You roll your eyes fondly. Nothing like decades-old gadget. Rivalries to spice up your bedtime history. A hush falls as the graduate student flicks through a stack of microfilm stills, showing Templar seals pressed into damp clay. She holds up one image, whispering dramatically, "Do you see how the seal's dots line up with the graffiti wheel?" In Section 11. It's no accident intended as a cryptic "You are here" marker. The second professor snorts. You're connecting dots on different stones hundreds of feet apart. That's pattern seeking, not proof. Historians still argue whether these scattered marks constitute deliberate waymarks or random. Pilgrim doodles. You shift your lantern beam to the chamber's side wall, where a collection of numbered metal tags hang from nails-enchained iron loops. Labeled I through V, the field archaeologist explains that early 20th century investigators attached these to catalog features before UNESCO's clearance projects. He plucks tag 3 and reads aloud. Greek cross fragment, believed relocated from Umayyad structures. He points to a carved stone beneath the tag, once thought to be Islamic in origin. New dating places that cross here in the Crusader. Period, he says, challenging our assumptions about who built which elements. Historians still argue whether Mamluk restorations reused Crusader stones or vice versa. You remember the bronze jug from Section 8, and imagine its water misting this very space centuries ago. You murmur, at least, that jug never had to defend itself in faculty meetings. The first professor slams a fist on the lectern. We need a unified interpretive framework. We're not picking through boutique artifacts. We're reconstructing a living narrative of sacred space. The graduate. Student leans back, arms crossed, unified. You want to stitch together legends, pilgrim graffiti, and geological anomalies. Good luck persuading the hardliners. Fringe commentary. Online forums brim with enthusiasts who blend Templar mythos, covert symbolism, and DIY archaeology, often dismissing professional critique as part of a conspiratorial establishment. Whether these communities unearth genuine insights or simply echo palpable. Echo chambers is hotly contested among digital humanities scholars. The second professor sighs, pushing back his chair. All right, we're agreed that there are at least 3 distinct construction phases: Herodian bedrock work, Crusader refurbishments, and Ottoman overlays. Our task is to sort artifacts accordingly. The field archaeologist nods. If we can align each fine scrolls from Section 9, coins, from Section 6, altars from Section 3 with its proper stratum, maybe we'll map the subterranean puzzle. Historians still argue whether stratigraphy here reflects continuous use or episodic repurposing driven by political shifts. You uncross your legs and decide to join the fray. You point to the carved frieze fragments you left in the recess. Those lotus bomb fragments from Section 10 aligned with the calyx motifs here. Then we have evidence of an intentional decorative program extending beyond the portico. The graduate student's laser pointer wavers in midair. Good catch, she admits, turning her beam toward the frieze. The second professor runs a finger along your suggested alignment, nodding. A renewed buzz arises as the group rearranges. Sketches and slides microfilm under magnifying glasses. The field archaeologist taps his recorder. We'll need 3D scans of all surfaces. Plus, new carbon-14 analyzes on organic residues from Section 8's jug and Section 5's slabs. You grin and quip. So basically, we need an army of drones, a nuclear reactor, and a time machine. The guide laughs, shaking his head. You rise from the bench, brushing dust from your trousers. You feel oddly energized by the debates. Momentum like you just witnessed an intellectual gladiator match where every point is swordplay. The professors swivel to you. Your lay observations sparked a useful connection. One says, "Fancy joining us for the next excavation season?" You smile, imagining course credits and dusty field boots. "I'll bring the bandana." You reply, before you exit. You record a quick note in your journal. Scholarly clash here yields new mapping strategy, joined slab. Alignment with graffiti map from Section 11. You tuck your notebook into your satchel beside the parchment. Map and precious reliquary. A fresh idea wells up. Perhaps? These disagreements aren't obstacles, but signposts guiding future discovery. You step back into the corridor, leaving the chamber's glow behind. The echo of raised voices fades, replaced by your own footsteps. The world above Jerusalem may never settle these debates, but down here, in the hush between dripping stones, you've witnessed how scholarly contention can illuminate as much as it obscures. As you trudge onward, the unresolved arguments swirl. Around you, promise and puzzle, challenge and charm, beckoning you toward yet another hidden door waiting to be unlatched. You settle onto a low stone bench, lantern in one hand and a bundle of weathered parchments in the other. The jasmine-scented air still clings to your skin, a gentle reminder of the spring chamber you passed through. Unfurling the topmost sheet, you reveal a sprawling map of Jerusalem sketched in sepia ink, its edges ragged and patched with later additions. Every line feels alive, streets twisting like coiled snakes, the Temple Mount drawn as a perfect square floating amid a sea of minarets and towers. A mainstream fact drifts into your mind. During the 12th and 13th centuries, map-making in Europe began to shift from symbolic mappae mundi toward more accurate portolan charts used by mariners. Knights Templar, with their network of ports and castles, likely had access to these cutting-edge sea charts and adapted similar techniques for land routes. Historians still argue whether the order maintained a centralized cartographic workshop, or simply commissioned local clerics to copy coastal charts for crusader convoys. You lean closer to inspect the ink's faded strokes. Beneath standard street names and pilgrim routes, faint annotations appear, teeny crosses marking hidden vaults, arrowheads pointing to spring-fed cisterns, in concentric circles framing cryptic Latin inscriptions like Solve Petrum, SEC, VN. You trace the loops with your fingertip, feeling the papyrus grain rough against your glove. A rat scurries by, pausing to sniff at a corner of the map before disappearing into a gap in the wall. You chuckle softly. Even rodents want a preview of the next chapter. With a tap of your dagger, you peel back a translucent overlay etched on thin vellum. Here, the cartographer sketched secret chambers beneath the temple mount, using a system of trapezoids and dozen radiating lines, most like a spider's web. Fringe lore suggests these diagrams encode astrological data, aligning subterranean vaults with positions of Jupiter and Saturn for maximum spiritual potency. Whether such cosmic alignment held real power or is merely the stuff of modern conspiracy channels remains fiercely debated among esoteric historians. You switch to a small LED flashlight you swore you'd keep off, angling the beam low to reveal hidden watermarks in the parchment. Under the ultraviolet glow, you spot lightly etched Templar crosses, three kinds. Actually, the standard red cross, a double-tailed cross, and a mariner's cross, suggesting navigation. You hold the map up to the lantern and see how the trio of crosses overlaps other features, like a ghostly watermark guiding you to priority sites. This layered technique might be the earliest medieval form of steganography, hiding messages in plain sight. Historians still argue whether Templars developed cryptographic innovations independently or borrowed them from Islamic scholars encountered in the Levant. A faint rustle behind you reminds you that you're not alone. The guide peers over your shoulder, eyebrows raised. "Those mariners' crosses make sense," he murmurs. They mark water sources and coastal fortresses on portolan charts. Here, they point to hidden shafts and cisterns, like a Templar compass rose for underground travel. You nod, imagining knights navigating beneath the city with sextants and oil lamps instead of ships at sea. You quip. So basically, they sidestepped traffic by going subterranean and express lanes. You line up the vellum overlay atop a fragment of carved frieze from section 10, aligning a tiny cross with a notch in the lotus palm pattern. The fit is uncanny. Where the map's radiating lines intersect, the frieze has matching gouge, likely places where cords were lashed for hoisting heavy slabs. You lean back, heart pounding. This map isn't just theoretical cartography. It's a construction blueprint. Fringe architects argue that Templar masons used such dossiers to pre-plan structural reinforcement and secret compartments. Whether this practice was standard across all Templar sites or limited to the Temple Mount remains a point of contention among medieval construction historians. Your lantern flickers as you examine a second parchment, smaller and more delicate. It's a sketch of the city's aqueduct network with hashed lines marking supply tunnels and water wheels. Someone, likely a Templar engineer, has overlaid small circles in red ink at precise intervals. You recall the spring and cistern from section 8. Now you see how they connect to a larger hydraulic system feeding crusader lodgings. You sip from your canteen, tasting the tang of metal and dust, and remark, "Guess plumbing the depths takes on a whole new meaning here." At the bottom corner of the aqueduct map, you discover a crudely drawn labyrinthine octagonal maze inked in vermilion. Its center annotated Cavia Sacra. The guide leans over and traces the path with his glove, tiptoeing through the mazes. Turns, sacred cage, he whispers. Maybe a ritual enclosure or a Templar meeting chamber hidden beneath the rock. You shudder at the thought of shadowy ceremonies deep underground, swords gleaming in torchlight, vows uttered in secret tongues. Historians still argue whether Templar chapter meetings were held in public chapels or in secluded vaults like this. A soft sigh echoes through the corridor beyond, as if the walls themselves are breathing. You glance toward the exit shaft from Section 4, feeling the map's arrows pull you forward. 3 jokes down, and you're still golden. Tunnels, mazes, and waterworks. Who knew medieval engineers loved urban planning more than knights loved swordplay? The guide shakes his head, stifling a laugh that mingles with distant drips, careful not to crease the fragile charts. You roll up the vellum overlays and slip them into a leather tube. You secure the tube with a length of linen from your scarf, knotting it twice for extra measure. The tube feels weighty at your side, not from heft, but from the promise of secrets it holds. You imagine unrolling these maps in a candlelit study back home, sipping tea while plotting your next excavation expedition. Right after you finally figure out how to get that labyrinth printed on a coffee mug, you tuck the map tube into your satchel beside the stone vessel from Section 10 and the reliquary from Section 6. Their combined bulk reminds you of every puzzle piece you've assembled so far: scrolls, coins, jars, and now cartographic revelations. You rise, brushing dust from the bench, and let your lantern beam sweep the chamber one last time. The map's ghostly lines fade into the shadows, leaving only your footprints and the faint echo of bearded cartographers hunching over ink-stained desks. A sudden clank from deeper in the tunnel startles you. You spin, lamp raised, heart thudding. The map tube tugs at your side like a talisman, urging you onward. You adjust your pack, feeling the outline of hidden vaults drawn into your shoulder. Ahead lies the path to the next secret chamber, lines on parchment transitioning into steps on ancient stone. With the maps guiding your way, you trudge forward, drawn by the promise of revelations etched in ink and stone. Somewhere ahead, a concealed door awaits, its lock inscribed in the same code you now carry. The city's subterranean heart pulses just beyond, awaiting the cartographer knight in you to chart its final territories. You slip through a narrow corridor of echoing vaults, the lantern's beams skimming damp stones streaked with rust-colored mineral veins. Each footstep kicks up a swirl of dust motes, dancing like ancient spirits in your light. You follow the guide's hushed whisper rumor that the Templars' most prized relics vanished during Saladin's reconquest, then reappeared centuries later in the hands of secret collectors. Your pulse quickens. The promise of rediscovery tugs at your imagination like a siren song. A sudden clank behind you echoes through the tunnel. You whirl around, half expecting a hidden door to slam shut, but it's only the guide adjusting his satchel. You quip. You'd think centuries-old stones could stay still for once, then suppress a grin when your echo answers back. The air tastes faintly of damp earth and aging parchments of crates that once shipped artifacts to European courts. Ahead, you emerge into a wider chamber where the floor's mosaic of broken tiles bears scorch marks and hoofprints, ingrained by hasty retreating horses. Here, centuries ago, Templar knights allegedly hid the Spear of Destiny, the lance said to have pierced Christ's side, along with a small obsidian box rumored to hold secret council's minutes. Mainstream records confirm that relics from the Temple Mount were taken to Constantinople in 1204, during the Fourth Crusade, and later dispersed across European treasuries. Historians still argue whether any of these objects ever returned to Jerusalem or remained abroad as diplomatic trophies. You crouch beside a recessed niche carved into the north wall. Inside, a small wooden crate, its iron bands half rusted away, sits on a bed of straw. You brush aside centuries of dust, revealing a faded wax seal embossed with a double-tailed Templar cross. A fringe account claims this box was lost when Napoleonic forces looted Malta in 1798, only to vanish again before resurfacing in a Sicilian monastery in 1834. Whether that provenance is factual or fabricated for intrigue remains fiercely debated by documentary scholars. You lift the crats with groans under your touch and pry the lid open. Inside lies a single iron rivet and a handful of scorched straw. Disappointment flares, dimmed by the thought that Solidar's reliquaries often contained symbolic remnants, straw from the manger or coals from the holy fire. You pull out one straw fiber and hold it to the lantern. It glows for a heartbeat before crumbling to ash. You murmur, "Well, at least this relic's self-destruct feature works." The guide chuckles as you sweep the ashes back into the crate next to the niche. You spot a shallow alcove lined with velvet that's turned gray. There rests a bronze chalice, tarnished and dented, but unmistakable. Its base engraved with the Templar motto, Non Nobis Domini. Mainstream inventories list a chalice matching this description in the collection of the Grand Masters Palace in Paris until the French Revolution, when it was sold off as part of aristocratic confiscations. Historians still argue whether the chalice currently in the Louvre is genuine or one of several clever 19th century replicas. You lift the chalice and bring it to your lips, affecting to taste aged wine but finding nothing. Instead, a faint metallic taste lingers. You sniff its rim and catch a whiff of old vinegar, or maybe just centuries of storage. You joke, tastes like ecclesiastical enthusiasm, and tuck the chalice into your satchel. Careful to cradle its rim with soft cloth so the dents don't tear through your pack. Nearby, a crate stenciled in faded Latin letters reads, Arma Hierosolymica, and you pry it open to reveal a set of sword pummels, their steel fittings blackened by fire. Fringe rumor holds that these pummels belonged to the knights who carried a fragment of the true cross into battle. Whether any blade fragment in the order's possession was genuinely from cavalry or merely medieval marketing is a debate as old as the Crusades themselves. You hold a pummel and rotate it in the lantern's glow. Each facet reflects a glint of light, like a starburstan echo of the motifs carved on the ciphers in section 5. You feel the cool metal's weight and muse. If only these swords could tell me their war stories, then knock on the pummel with a fingertip, producing a hollow ring that startles a bat into flight. The flapping wings brush your helmet. You yelp, half enthralled by the artifact, half annoyed at its timing. Across the chamber, a crumbling wooden cabinet half buried under rubble. You discover a glass jar sealed with clay. You clear away debris until you can lift the lid, revealing a scroll tightly wound and bound with a leather thong. Carefully, you extract it, the parchment stiff but intact. The script is Latin in a clear 13th century hand, listing a series of miraculous healings attributed to the chalice you just packed away. The scroll claims that chalice's water could cure fever and broken bones alike. It's an irony since you just tasted nothing. A mainstream fact, medieval miracle collections often cataloged the therapeutic uses of holy objects to attract pilgrims and donations. Historians still argue whether such miracle accounts were faithful transcriptions of oral testimony or scribes' embellishments to bolster relics' reputations. You unroll the scroll on a flat stone and examine its list. Each entry is dated by the regnal years of European kings Henry II, Philip Augustus, Richard the Lionheart tying Jerusalem's relic legends directly to Western courts. You murmur, I bet those monarchs didn't consider this a bedtime story. Then, carefully re-roll the scroll, the sharpened twig. You make a tiny notch on its leather mark to match it with the ledger you hope to find above ground. Fringe archivists debate whether original Templar inventories were maintained in Tripoli or Constantinople, whether these scrolls ever left the Levant intact, or were piecemeal dispersed across monastic libraries. Your lantern flickers as you sweep the chamber floor. Half buried in mortar rubble, you glimpse a glint of polished gold. You dig a finger into the grit and lift a delicate gold filigree in the shape of a lily, likely an earring or pendant. You recall the lapis pendants from section 6, imagining a pair once dangling from a squire's ears. You attach the filigree to your scarf, joking, instant bling beats modern festival outfits. The resonance of your humor lights a spark. In the guide's eyes, you rise and test the chamber walls for hidden niches, gently tapping to listen for hollows. Behind a loose stone, you reveal an iron ring. You pull it, triggering a panel to swing inwards. Inside is a slender steel rod topped with a tiny wooden cross, blackened but unmistakable. Fringe tales claim such rods were used in Templar initiation. Rites to touch the aspirant's forehead with sacred dust. Whether this practice is documented beyond a handful of mysterious accounts, or as modern hearsay, is a point of vigorous scholarly debate. You wrap the rod in linen and tuck it beside the map tube. As you gather your finds, the chalice, sword, pummels, scroll, and tiny filigree, you feel the weight of centuries pressing on your shoulders like a mantle. Each item carries a story of loss and recovery, of wars waged and secrets guarded beneath these vaulted stones. A final joke drifts to your lips. I should charge admission for this archaeological garage sale. You grin at the echoing vault and, with a nod to the guide, step back into the corridor. Behind you, the chamber lies silent once more, its lost treasures reclaimed by those willing to brave its depths. Lantern in hand and satchel full of whispers, you trudge onward, following the map's last arrows toward the final mysteries awaiting your pickaxe and curiosity. You step into a final, echoing vault where the narrow beam of your lantern trembles against the stone vault overhead. The air here is still, almost reverent, as if the chamber itself is holding its breath. You can feel the weight of every discovery you've made settling around you like dust. The broken altar stones from section 3. The sealed vault door from section 4. The cryptic ciphers on the slabs in section 5. The gold coins and pendants in section 6. And the strange geological stratum in section 7. Across all these tunnels, you've tasted sacred water, unraveled scroll fragments, and traced graffiti messages carved by unknown hands. Yet here, at the end of your journey, you confront a question that has outlasted every artifact. What did the Knights Templar truly find in Jerusalem? You run a gloved hand along the carved grooves in a massive foundation block, recalling how Herod's engineers quarried this limestone for the Second Temple Facade. A mainstream fact, the Temple Mount platform was enlarged and reshaped under Herod the Great between 20 and 10 BCE. Using massive ashlars that remain the keystone of the Western Wall today. Historians still argue whether Templar renovations preserved those original Herodian courses or obscured them beneath their own masonry. You pause by a shallow basin carved into the floor. You pour a last drop from the bronze jug acquired in section 8. Watching the water trace a delicate channel you've come to recognize as a cipher in stone. Fringe lore speculates that the Templars rigged hidden water traps to seal vaults with impenetrable hydraulic locks, an ingenious medieval security system powered by Gihon Springs flow. Whether any such waterworks were ever truly watertight or remained functional beneath layers of silt is a subject of heated debate among hydraulic scholars. Deep in your satchel. The obsidian box from section 2 nudges the map tube from section 13, and the stone vessel from section 10. You take out that vessel again, its overlapping triangles still catching flickers of lamplight. You remember whispering, this might be a miniature Ark of the Covenant, only to chalk it up as fringe fantasy. Yet the vessel's perfect fit in the basalt altar suggests intentional placement. Historians still argue whether small stone jars in temple contexts held sacred oils, or if Templars misappropriated commonplace vessels to cloak themselves in biblical authority. A distant drip interrupts your thoughts. You look up and spot a tiny carved niche above a lintel once undisturbed, now revealing itself to you. Inside lies a tarnished bronze pendant from section 6's cache. Dangling by a fragment of linen as if still wearing its chain, you lift it gently and laugh softly. Persistent little bling won't stop haunting me. The guide grins, and you remember joking about medieval festival fashion. This pendant's return arc reminds you how the Templars rode out of Jerusalem with more than swords. They carried symbols of syncretic belief you've only begun to fathom. You step over a mosaic of broken Byzantine tiles, worn smooth by countless feet. A rat scuttles across, slipping behind an iron ring from section 4. You quip. He's on his 20th rat edition of this tour. And yet, even the local wildlife seems curated for your ear. Tiny echoes that guide you. Pause that map, the ground. Like living breadcrumbs, you move toward the far wall, where a rough-hewn recess holds a battered scroll tube, the one from section 9. You unwrap it, exposing the Hebrew fragments and the augmented psalm you found. You recite the extra clause under your breath, I shall stand upon the rock of the Lord's fortress. You shiver, suddenly aware of how those scribal additions hint at a nightly reinterpretation of sacred text. Fringe theologians insist that a secret Templar liturgy once thrummed through these vaults, blending Jewish psalmody with Christian martial fervor. Whether any formal ritual books from that tradition linger in private collections, or if they were lost forever, remains disputed among liturgical historians. At the chamber center stands a circular dais carved with concentric channels of the Star of David pattern you piece together in section 10. You kneel and brush away dust, uncovering a thin sunburst motif along the innermost ring. You whisper, just like that starburst cipher from section 5, marveling at the recurrence. 3 jokes in, you muse, I swear I saw that star in my coffee grounds this morning. Yet in all your levity, a recognition blooms. This repeating symbol might be the Templars. True calling card marking each significant vault they constructed. Or rediscovered. You tap your pickaxe handle against the dais and feel a slight hollow click. The dais slides upward on hidden rails, revealing a final chamber, a narrow cocoon lined with oiled cedar planks. The scent of cedar hits you like a memory you never lived. Inside, a single stone pedestal holds an empty niche carved to the perfect dimensions of your obsidian box. Your breath catches. You place the box in the niche. Within it nestles the familiar echo of weightlessness. As though it was never meant to bear heavy treasure, but to signify an absence, the Ark, the Grail, the great relic that no one has yet proven to exist. You step back, heart pounding, and settle onto the chamber floor. The walls here are unadorned, save for faint mortar lines and a single Latin phrase etched above the entrance. In tenebris lux, caverit, ver, in darkness. The light is sought. You trace the letters slowly, feeling the hollow of each carved stroke. Mainstream inscriptions in Templar sites often invoked Christ as the light of the world. Yet this phrase shifts agency to the seeker. Historians still argue whether such inscriptions were mainstream devotions or personalized maxims of individual knights. You lean back and let the silence envelop you. The combined weight of your artifacts, coins, scrolls, pendants, maps feels both immense and strangely insubstantial. You realize that what the Knights Templar found in Jerusalem may not have been a single phial of unearthly oil or a golden chalice, but a network of meanings woven into the city's very stones. Their greatest discovery, perhaps, was how to load each fragment of history with layered significance, turning walls and channels into a living palimpsest. As you rise, you notice a final drip from the roof, landing in the center of the days with perfect rhythm. You smile and quip, "At least someone kept the beat for me." The guide nods, and you both turn toward the exit shaft. Your lanterns illuminate the path that leads back over every chamber you've traversed: the graffiti gallery, the scholars, debate hall, the map vault, and all the hidden niches that are now, for a time, revealed. You spot scuffs on the corridor ceiling from your rat guide's tiny paws and laugh softly. "He's marking his territory," you murmur. But territory here is less about land than memory. Every mark you made, footprint, sketch, journal, note, carves a path for whoever follows. You take one last look at the empty niche in the final chamber. Breathe in the cedar-tinged air and step forward. You trudge back toward the tunnel you first breached, feeling both lighter and more burdened. Lighter because you leave behind emptiness itself. More burdened because you carry questions that have no visible answer. Did the Templars take the Ark? Did they unearth a vanished library of Solomon? Or did they discover that the true treasure of Jerusalem is the web of stories and symbols that bind stone, water, and human faith together? Historians still argue whether the Templars' greatest find was physical wealth or intangible lore, as you ascend the narrow shaft for the final time. The city's distant sounds filter down, faint traffic hum, distant prayer calls, the reminder of a world above. You emerge into the pre-dawn light once more, dust coating your boots and your soul. You tuck your satchel close, heart thrumming with the echoes of every chamber. The world above Jerusalem awaits your telling. But these vaults will keep their secrets a little longer, whispering in the darkness, awaiting the next curious soul ready to seek the light. Asterisk now, as the moon's glow softens behind you and the distant call to prayer fades into the dawn. Allow your racing thoughts to slow. Imagine the tunnels, stones, settling back into stillness. Each carved groove and chiseled seam drawn into a deep, silent reverie. Breathe in the gentle hush of early morning air, tasting its cool clarity on your lips. You've walked through layers of history and myth, held ancient fragments in your hands, and felt the weight of questions too big to answer with any single artifact. Let the images drift away like motes in a sunbeam. The glitter of gold coins, the hush of sacred water pooling in carved stone, the whispered inscriptions on weathered slabs. Each echo now settles, melding into a soft hum you can carry with you. Trust that these tunnels will rest once more, their secrets suspended like fine droplets waiting for another curious mind. Tonight, you have chased mysteries and touched legends, and that gentle suspense can lull you into calm reverie. Feel the path home stretch behind you like a braid of light and shadow, each twist reminding you that sometimes the journey matters more than the prize. Carry this realization into your dreams, that seeking can be as profound as finding. Now, let your eyelids grow heavy, your breath deepen, and as you drift, know that the stones beneath Jerusalem still murmur their stories, waiting for you or someone new to listen again. End of script. Sweet dreams.